Hey there folks, how you doing today? Welcome back to the channel. Please bear with any background racket that you might hear throughout this production. We're on location where life happens, and sometimes there's stuff going on right out there that interferes with what we're trying to do in here. Also, it's extremely windy and I can hear stuff banging around out there, so just bear with that. Let's not let it distract from the really cool stuff that we have for you here today. Out here on the table in front of me, for those of you that are not immediately familiar with it, is our Stevens Model 334 chambered in .308 Winchester. This rifle has been featured here on this channel several times in the recent past, and it has been a huge crowd favorite. Not only does it perform well above its price point, it's just really a good rifle all the way around. Now, speaking of the 334's price point, it is what I consider to be a budget tier rifle. Comes in under $500, and because of that, we put a budget tier scope on it. The scope that is presently on top of the rifle is a Crimson Trace Brushline BDC 3 to 9 by 40 with 1-inch rings, and it's just a standard hunting scope for a standard hunting rifle. But that's not the scope we're here to talk about today. If you look down here in front, you'll see a box from Discovery OPT. I'm going to read the specs to you off of this card. The scope that we will be reviewing today is the Discovery OPT ED PRS GEN2 5 to 25 by 56 FIR first focal plane Z. Wow, that's a mouthful. That is a really big title for a scope. It's kind of ironic because the scope we're talking about today is a really big scope. Now, it's a 5 to 25 by 56, so you know it's going to be big. It has a 34 millimeter tube, so you know it's going to be big. Folks, I had no idea how big it was going to be until I headed out of the box. You want to talk about something that makes a fella feel like Deuce Bigelow?
That's a huge bitch!
That's right. This is the largest rifle scope that I've ever had my hands on. This thing is massive. Not only is it really big, it weighs a ton. The spec sheet says this scope weighs 44 ounces. I weighed it with the lens covers on, no rings or anything else, just the lens covers, and it came in at 46, which tells me that the lens covers were not included in that weight of 44.3 ounces. Now, by comparison, I have listed here the weights of 4 other 5 to 25 by 56 scopes that are presently available on the market. Primary Arms SLX Athena has a listed weight of 34.6 ounces. The Arkin EP5 has a weight listed of 39.2 ounces. The Vortex Venom is 35 ounces. The Athlon Midas Tac is 30 ounces. So the Discovery OPT is heavier than all of the competition. So what does that mean for us? Well, Discovery has it listed as a hunting scope. From personal experience, I can tell you that if you choose that as a hunting scope, you're probably doing the kind of hunting where you're hunting from a stationary position and you're not the guy climbing over the side of a mountain. And that's kind of one of the reasons why I picked this rifle to showcase the scope on. The Stevens Model 334, for what it is an extremely heavy rifle. So we're going to mount the Discovery OPT on top of the 334, and through the magic of video editing, along with a little help from our Wheeler Fat Wrench, we got the scope mounted and torqued to spec in no time. Discovery includes in the box with the scope all of the accessories necessary to make it run. You got scope ring covers, a throw lever, a sunshade, a set of rings, a cleaning tool, and perhaps my favorite accessory of them all, this nifty little scope leveling kit. I was so impressed with that, I decided to include a little portion here so you could see how it works. Perhaps one of my favorite features of the Discovery OPT series is the scope leveling kit that comes in the package. Typically, I'm not a big fan of gimmicky items, but in this case, it's really neat. The base of the leveling kit is nothing more than a block of aluminum with a right angle machined into the bottom of it and an angled groove machined into the top. You'll notice here on the bottom of the scope you have a nice flat surface. If you index that more or less in line with the top of your rail, utilizing that flat machined base, simply slide it on top of the rail, and then using one of the 2 angled wedges that comes with the kit, in this case we must use the taller one because our rings are so high, simply slide it into the groove on top of the leveling kit base, and it will help you line up your scope in relation with the top of the rail. Now, A word of caution, if you push this too hard, as you can see here, you'll pick up the scope body off of the top of the bottom ring. We don't want that to happen. So once you get it lined up, just back it off just a little bit and then hold it in place while you finger tighten the torque screws on the top of the ring cap. Once you have those finger tight, go ahead and remove the wedge so that it doesn't become pinched when we torque the scope rings to spec with our Wheeler fat wrench. The cap screw should be torqued to 20 inch-pounds. So once we had the scope situated on the rifle, I took it out to the range and ran it through its paces to see if I could determine whether or not this optic is a good value. Speaking of the value of the optic, it comes in just under $400 MSRP here in the United States, and as I mentioned earlier, that does include all of the accessories. By comparison, the other 4 scopes that I had compared it to earlier when we were talking about the weight are all significantly more expensive. So while they are lighter, you would have to pay more to achieve that lower weight, and that's something that you may want to consider. Concerning the optical clarity, this scope was fantastic at all the ranges that I tested it at when I had it out in the field. That was from 25 yards all the way out to 300 yards. The parallax was great. The high definition lenses were spot on. Discovery lists this as having 13 lenses of Japanese extra low dispersion glass, and I think that probably tends to lend to some of that heavier weight that we see on this model. The turrets are really good. They have a good tactile and audible click to them. The return to zero seemed to work really well. I ran it through a box. It got right back to where the first round was, so I'm going to give it a passing grade on the turret movement. There was one situation when I was sighting it in where it seemed like I got a little bit of a jump, but I couldn't replicate that, so I'm going to say it was a non-issue. The elevation turret has a zero stop. The windage turret does not, but the markings are clearly refined, and there was plenty of side-to-side movement and up and down movement once I had the scope sighted in at 100 yards. The parallax adjustment worked all the way from 25 out to 300 without issue, and the magnification ring, while stiff with the throw lever, was easy enough to manipulate. This is a first focal plane rifle scope, so the center of the reticle does grow as the magnification increases. Also, your hash marks on the reticle are true whether you're at 5 or 25 in magnification, which is significantly an upgrade over a second focal plane rifle scope. Now, speaking of that reticle, this is what it looks like. You'll see that it has the Christmas tree on there. For a hunting application, I think this is a little too busy. It's more of a tactical scope reticle. For me personally, if I'm hunting, I want something a little simpler in terms of reticle, but your mileage may vary. All right, let's see. The illumination, there's 6 positions on there. The bottom 2 are for use with night vision. The other 4 would work well in low light applications, but did not seem to be of much benefit in broad daylight. Of course, most hunting occurs early in the morning or late in the evening, so that would be a non-issue in terms of using it as a hunting application. The rings are of extremely high quality. The rings are also extremely high. If you look here, I can fit my hand under the objective and under the scope base when mounted on this rifle. It's going to be the same way on the precision rifle setup, and it even seems like maybe it might be a little bit high on like an AR or AR-10 platform. I really wish they would have supplied a little lower set of rings. These are the ones it came with, so they are the ones I used. I just know that on this rifle, I was having issues with the stock slapping me a little bit because I wasn't able to get a proper cheek hold. So that's just something to take into consideration. Depending on your application, the supplied rings might be too high. Let's see, what else? Going back to the significant weight of this scope and felt recoil, obviously increasing the weight of your weapon is going to help with recoil. So if you're using it on a large caliber rifle, it's going to help you out in the long runs in terms of recoil mitigation. So we'll give it a point for that one, even though it is a little heavier than a lot of scopes of its caliber. If I had to assign a numerical score to what I would say the scope achieved at the range, I would give it a good solid 7 out of 10. It wasn't perfect. It is a little heavy. The reticle was a little bit faint, but all in all, it was completely serviceable, and we got good results with it during our range testing. I would recommend that if you are in the market for a budget high-performance scope, you probably would do okay with this one. Just know that there are some limitations to it, and those are going to be more or less covered with what we talked about earlier in this review. I'm going to let it go for now. I'd sure like to hear what you think of it. Have you tried one of these out? Maybe have you been thinking about trying? Let me know down below. Until next time, take care, folks, and God bless.